Blessings, beloveds. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Okay, guys, I'm going to just give you a small tutorial on transiting Pluto in relation to the 4 angles of the chart. So before I start to unpack that a little bit, first of all, let's just remind ourselves, Pluto, the most powerful planet in the chart, in my opinion. Incredibly slow moving planet, 248 years to do an entire lap around our solar system, spends about up to 18 years in a particular zodiacal sign, so it spends a long time as it's evolving our soul. Okay, the angles of the chart are really powerful, potent, energetic power points. So first of all, the angles of the chart are determined through your time of birth. So if you do not have the correct time of birth, you will not have the correct angles, as in the degrees on the angles. So for example, I've got 20 degrees on my midheaven, 20 degrees of Libra, and I've got 2 degrees of Aquarius on my Ascendant. That is based on my time of birth actually being 100% accurate. It's 100% accurate because it's been rectified. It was rectified a very long time ago. The original birth time that my mother gave me wasn't actually correct. It was out by, 44 minutes to be precise. So it was wrong by 44 minutes. If I had stayed with the time of birth that my mother gave me, that would give me a different MC, different Ascendant, different Descendant, and different IC in terms of the degrees on those 4 angles. And it's really important to understand, because if you don't have the right degrees on those angles, your predictive work is not going to be accurate, because the timing is not going to be accurate. So what I mean by predictive work is when you have transits on those angles, or when you're doing secondary progressions and you are progressing the angles of the chart. If the time of birth is not right, then those angles are not going to be right. Therefore, the timing of events are not going to be correct. Now, the 4 angles of the chart, as I said, are power points. They're literally like plugging something into a PowerPoint in order to recharge it. They are very potent. They are very dynamic points of the chart, and they correspond to very personal aspects of our life, such as who we are, ourself, and in addition, the relationships we have and develop and experience and encounter through our life. So Ascendant, Descendant. The MC and the IC correlate with the MC correlates with our external world, life, view, experience, status, position, life path, life calling. And the IC correlates with our internal world, our inner life, our private life, our home life, our family life, and the unconscious as well. So those 4 points are really, it's the cross of matter. That's what we call it in terms of the 4 angles of the birth chart. They can only be correct with the correct birth time. Now, I specialize in rectifying charts, so I'm highlighting this to demonstrate the absolute paramount importance of predictive work basically being accurate and correct when you have a correct birth time. So, when we're having planets hitting those angles, those elements of our life are really transformed, changed, challenged, transitioned, transcended, lessons, from very deep levels occur, emotional, psychological, spiritual, soul level, particularly when we're talking about Pluto hitting any of those 4 angles, whether it's through a conjunction, square, or opposition. Those 3 major aspects are very, very powerful aspects, especially when you have Pluto making a conjunction to your Ascendant, or your MC, or your IC, or your Descendant, or forming a square or forming an opposition to any of those 4 angles. It will be life-changing. And certainly we must bring into context as well, I guess, to a degree, you know, what age the person is at when they're having this Pluto transit on one of those angles. Because when you're 2 years old, and when you're 20 years old, and when you're 60 years old, life is very different. So the context of your environment, your level of awareness and consciousness, your level of experience, and what you understand is very different at all those stages in life. But nevertheless, I don't want to take away from a 2-year-old, for example, can have a really dramatic critical experience at the age of 2, which can be a near-death experience, for instance, or some massive crisis that involves incredible danger to the 2-year-old. And that can be Pluto, by the way, especially if Pluto's transiting the Ascendant. So when we're looking at Pluto natally, you know, we must understand that its zodiacal position is a generational statement, although you can take, you know, some meaning and some understanding from the archetypal energy that Pluto is in, such as whether it's in Sag, Scorpio, Virgo, etc. But really the thing that shows you the most about how Pluto is playing out for you, or what it's saying, what it's pointing to with your soul's evolution, is its house location, its aspects, its polarity point, the moon's nodes, and any aspects between Pluto and the moon's nodes as well. Even if you were just to look at those components of your birth chart, you would understand a great deal of your purpose, your life purpose, your soul's path and your soul's purpose, in terms of where it's at in its evolutionary path thus far. Because the understanding and the implication with Pluto is that we have multiple lifetimes, okay? So we need to be open to that concept, belief, understanding, whatever you want to call it. So when you've got Pluto transiting any of those 4 angles, it will literally change your life. Let's just talk a little bit about the Ascendant. If you've got Pluto conjunct your Ascendant, it's naturally going to be opposing your Descendant, isn't it? So again, you know, this is where we're always bringing in polarities when we're looking at our birth chart. So when you're looking at the Ascendant and you've got a planet transiting that point, you will actually be looking at the Descendant as well, because it's actually bringing those 2 paths of life into action. Okay, it's dynamic energy affecting both those areas of life. So self and other, self relationships, how I relate, how you relate, how you relate to yourself, how you relate to others, and how you form relationships, and what kinds of relationships you've had previously, and you know what you've learned, and how you've developed, and how you've grown, and all this sort of stuff. But if you're in a relationship while transiting Pluto comes to your Ascendant, you're going to undergo an incredibly deep metamorphosis, transformative experience that could last up to 3 years. That's a long time. It's a long time to feel a Pluto energy in transit in your life. Let me be very clear about this. Pluto transits are not lightweight. They are incredibly heavy, incredibly intense, can be incredibly dark. It's the dark night of the soul. Without the dark, we cannot have the light. So, you know, this idea that we can evade suffering is not accurate, because we can't evade it. What we can do is grow through it. So we can grow through these intensified transitional stages of life, or we can be taken under. It depends. It depends where we're at, how conscious we are. Now, to say that one is conscious or spiritualized or evolved you know, to high degrees or has great awareness, is not to say that when they have a Pluto transit that it's going to be easy and they're not going to experience any kind of pain or suffering. The fact that we are born into this physical body and this physical reality is painful and suffering within itself. That alone is actually painful and induces a fair bit of suffering, simply because we must go through the process of birth and death and rebirth and so forth. And even in the one incarnation, we go through symbolic deaths, you know, metaphorical and of course literal, whether it's our own, which of course it will be at one stage, and certainly of people around us, people that we love, that end up leaving, transitioning to the next stage in their evolution. But in terms of how we experience it here as an earthly experience, it's a death, it's a physical death, and it's incredibly painful. And Pluto brings up all these sorts of issues, okay? So when, you know, Pluto transiting the Ascendant Descendant is going to highlight your own persona, your own who you are, how you view the world, what you are projecting out there, and what you need to undergo internally very deeply, and transform and die to and be reborn again. You know, Pluto is the agent of transformation. When we have a strong Pluto transit, we go through very significant experiences feeling like death, whether it's literal or symbolic. And what happens to us in that process is that we do the butterfly thing, you know, the well, before we become the butterfly, we're in the cocoon, we go into that cocoon zone, the dark zone, the unconscious zone, and we work through and process a number of different things that need to be worked through from that soul level, and then eventually we can, you know, be transformed into the butterfly. That is possible for every single one of us, okay? But the thing is this, it's very much connected to, you know, what kind of personality you are. You know, are you a power hungry person? You know, do you like to overpower people? Do you like to control people? Is power your thing of, you know, how you get off and what makes you feel good about yourself and so forth? If you are operating from that kind of stream of consciousness, you will encounter a Pluto transit in a very difficult way, okay? Because Pluto can bring up very dark things, such as people wanting to control, manipulate, abuse. You can be a victim. You can make other people victims. It brings up a lot of terrible, dark, murky stuff. You know, we're talking about Scorpio energy, essentially, on a darker, sort of more unconscious level. But certainly on a more elevated conscious level, it is that ability to go into those deeper components within our own psyche, within our unconscious component, our subconscious components, and actually clear out the space there. You know, Pluto was also known as Hades, who was the god of the underworld, and he abducted Persephone and took her into the underworld, and he raped her. Now, we don't need to take that as a literal explanation of how Pluto operates, although it can be any of those things in terms of literally manifesting on an abusive level with rape and sexual abuse and all that sort of stuff. It certainly can be all of that. But on a more conscious, spiritualized level, what we're actually talking about when Persephone is taken into the underworld is, you know, it's that element within us where we need to go very deep inside ourselves and actually investigate and feel vulnerable and feel exposed and see truths about ourselves that have been out of sight or you know, unable to reach on, because we don't access this part of ourselves on a day-to-day basis. If we did, you know, it's exhausting. It requires a lot of psychic energy and, you know, spiritual energy and physical energy and emotional energy and mental energy but its primary goal and purpose is to liberate us, to free us, to transform us from the stuff that we hold and carry, whether it's through previous lifetimes or whether it's in fact even just through this current lifetime. So it's a real opportunity to actually liberate and transform yourself and get to a closer truth of who you are and your soul's path and journey, and what is important for you and what you need to actually die to, right? And this is ascendant stuff I'm talking about, and because it's opposing the descendant, it's affecting the whole world of relationships. So if you're in a relationship, classic symbolism could be that that the relationship dies. If you're not in a relationship, it could be that someone comes back into your life from the past, because Pluto is also connected to things that reappear, so people that reappear in our lives. But essentially, it's you know, it's death of the ego, okay, to put it quite simply. So we undergo very deep transforming deaths, you know, that smashes the ego out of its little game, its little 3D game. Now, you know, for Pluto on your ascendant and opposite your descendant, or vice versa, in order for the timing of that event, that transit, to be right, you need to have your right time of birth. Your right time of birth gives you the right degrees on your angles. If you don't have the right time of birth, then you've got the wrong degrees on your angles, then the transit of Pluto that you're looking at is going to be 1 or 2 or 3 years out of sync of, you know, where perhaps it should be, based on the fact that, let's just say, you had a wrong time of birth. You know, Pluto aspecting the MC and IC is an incredibly powerful transit. It has proven to be the most powerful transit in my life, this incarnation. Pluto has been squaring my MC since early last year, and will continue all of this year, and probably finish somewhere in 2019. So it's a 2 to 3 year transit, which, when it's, in my case, it's squaring my MC, so it has brought about very deep, private, personal issues relating to my personal life and also relating to my professional life, not in the sphere of astrology, my other professional life, which is counselling, and the establishment that I work for currently. So, you know, Pluto brings up a lot of power struggles and power issues as well that we need to manage and deal with. Because what can usually happen as well is that people feel that Pluto energy from us, and if we're not managing that Pluto energy consciously, and we're abusing the power of Pluto, it can really make other people feel quite threatened by you as well. You know, Pluto can be a very threatening presence and energy. It's overpowering. It's the most powerful energy, really. So depending on, you know, what's happening in your life and what age you're at, and, you know, where you're working, whether it's a professional career or, you know, whether you're just in the flow of different things, it's going to bring up some power issues and some deep issues of transformation that you need to undergo, which will essentially be life changing. There is no question about that. As I said, it's happened in my own life. This Pluto experience and transit is still going on. It's been the most excruciating, most painful, most devastating experience in my life for me. I'm not trying to make it all bad and scare you, but I am trying to emphasize the power of Pluto and how it does literally change your life when you have it over any of those angles in a tremendous way. It's life-changing. There's no other way I can put it. Now, in my case, this is very difficult for me to talk about, so I will not unpack it, but I will just briefly mention that Pluto transiting, squaring my midheaven actually, because I've got 20 degrees of Libra in my midheaven, and Pluto is at 20 of Capricorn. Capricorn squares Libra. This resulted in the person who I adore the most in this existence, and probably every other existence I've had, my father, to leave this world. So that was Pluto squaring my midheaven. I'm still in a grieving process because it's still very raw for me, which is why I struggle to actually talk about it. But I decided tonight that I would be brave enough to just mention it in what I'm trying to demonstrate here with regards to the power of Pluto transiting any of the 4 angles across of matter, Ascendant, Descendant, MCIC, in your birth chart, and how life-changing it can be. And also, the reason I mentioned it is to demonstrate to you that if in fact my time of birth was wrong, then this transit would not coincide with this particular loss and experience that I've had with my father. Okay, so as I said earlier, the time of birth that my mother gave was wrong, and my chart was rectified, and through the rectified time, it specifically correlates with Pluto transiting my midheaven. Now, don't forget, you might be wondering, how does my father fit into the midheaven? Well, the MC and IC angles and axes is the parental axes of your birth chart, okay? So those 2 axes always point to your parents, hence my father. And also, while Pluto is squaring my midheaven, it's also squaring my IC, and I've got 4 planets in my 4th house, so it's hitting quite a few things. So yeah, there you go. I really just wanted to just mention the power and presence of Pluto as it actually aspects any of your angles. You may feel that you can prepare yourself, and perhaps to a degree you can, but in truth, the whole experience of Pluto when it hits one of those angles is not something you can control. Okay, it's very much out of our control, which is what makes it so incredibly difficult. It's a soul experience. It's the dark night of the soul experience, which can, turn into the light, but you cannot undergo a Pluto transit without going into the deepest aspects of your being and who you are, and what you need to die to and let go of. And we hear that term a lot, that expression a lot, let go of this, let go of that. And, we can do that with certain things at certain times, but Pluto is very different to that kind of letting go. It's the deepest of depths. Its still waters run deep. There is nothing deeper than the presence of Pluto aspecting via transit a personal planet in your chart, and in this case specifically the angles of your chart. It will forever change you. Okay. Just one other thing to, I guess, demonstrate again the importance of time of birth. And if you don't have an accurate time of birth, or if it's a bit sketchy or whatever, please contact me, and that's something that I specialize in and that I can help you with. If you just want your chart rectified and you don't want a reading, we can do that as well. Or if you want a reading and a rectification, I can do that as well. Now, what I want to show you is very simply you can actually test what I'm talking about, all right, with regards to the angles on your birth chart if they are not accurate in their degrees, and there's a zodiacal degree which is based on your time of birth. And not everyone is going to have this, but for those of you that do, and you can do this with pretty much all the planets, but when we're talking about Pluto, there's something very dramatic and critical that shows up, okay? So, let's just say that you had Pluto here in the first house at 20 degrees of Sag. So Pluto, 20 degrees of Sag, okay, in your first house, which means you've got Sag rising. And let's just say that you had 18, don't know if you can see that clearly, but what I've written is 18 degrees of Sag, okay? So let's just say that your Ascendant was 18 degrees of Sag, and you had Pluto at 20 degrees of Sag. Now, not everyone's going to have this configuration, okay? But just try and understand the principle, okay? And the principle is related to the technique of progressions, which means 1 day equals 1 year, okay? Now, with the technique of 1 day equals 1 year, what we do is we progress the Ascendant. So, when we progress the Ascendant to 20, which is just 2 degrees, which equals 2 years, okay? Because 1 day equals 1 year. So, when we progress the Ascendant to 20, that means that via progression, the Ascendant hits Pluto at the age of 2 years old. If you have that configuration, you can actually play around with this principle. And if you had something on the MC, IC, or Descendant, it's the same idea, it's the same principle. You progress the angle to the planet. It could be 2 degrees, it could be 5 degrees, it could be 10 degrees. I've just used 2 degree orb as an example to highlight 2 years of age. So if you had that configuration at the age of 2, it would be very likely that you would have experienced, even though you're just a toddler and you're just 2 years old, you would have experienced something very dramatic and critical and life-threatening at the age of 2, either personally yourself or to those in your immediate environment, such as your family particularly, okay? So this is another way you can kind of test to see if your time of birth is actually correct. If you've got planets close to the angles, you can do this. It's a really good way to test whether your time of birth is correct, because if your time of birth is correct, the angles, the degrees of the angles, will correspond with the progression of the angle and the planet coming together at a specific age. Just remember, 1 day equals 1 year, okay? So that's just another little tip for you. But, okay, I'll just finish up. So just to summarize, when we have a Pluto transit on any of the angles, it is life-changing, okay? And the life-changing description is related to what those angles correlate with. And as I said, the Ascendant, Descendant is the whole relating world access principle, how you relate with yourself, and certainly how you relate in relationships. So if you're in a relationship and Pluto comes along on the Descendant or the Ascendant, it's going to expose everything about you, about the partner, about the relationship. It's going to leave you both feeling quite raw and perhaps quite vulnerable as well. I mean, there could be power struggles as well. That's a very common manifestation of Pluto on the Descendant. So yeah, look, there's a lot of different delineations, you know, in terms of what Pluto could mean on these angles. And I'm not going to spend any more time unpacking that right now, because I want to complete this video for this evening, because it's actually very, very hot here today and I'm boiling. It's peak summertime here in Melbourne. So anyway, I really just wanted to alert your attention to the power of the angles, and they are how dynamic those energy points are. When any planet goes over those angles, it's a very powerful experience in your life, right? Especially when you're talking about the outer planets that move fairly slowly. And because they move fairly slowly, what usually happens is that an outer planet will hit the angle, such as Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto, and it's very difficult to make sense of what's actually going on, because the energy is just, it's unfolding over a fairly long period of time. So that the transits of the outer planets on the angles have a fairly long cycle, and they can bring up a sequence of things that, you know, start to sort of build, and you reach your kind of climax when you have your final hit. Now, the outer planets will have they'll have, in terms of the cycle of when they're making an aspect to one of your angles, they will hit the angle up to 5 times, okay, or up to 3 times, depending on what cycle they're in. But so when one of these planets is forming a conjunction or a square or an opposition to one of these angles, because the outer planets are frequently in their retrograde motion, and then, you know, moving direct and then going back again and so forth, this is what causes the triple or 5 hits to a particular angle, or even a planet for that matter. And it is the dates of those exact hits that often can really trigger things to actually unfold as well. So the in-between moments of the entire transit can be areas where there doesn't appear to be much going on, or it's hard to identify what's going on. And when you have the hits with the dates, when the planet, for example, first makes its first conjunction, and then it decides to go retrograde, and then it comes back and it makes a conjunction again to the angle, so that's the second hit, and then it goes retrograde, and then it will come back again and it'll make another hit, and that's the third hit, for example. So those 3 hits, you need to look at those dates. They're very, very important dates. They will really show you the timing of things that can be triggered during those times, relating to the planet in question, which in this case happens to be Pluto, and relating to the angle in question as well, in terms of Pluto aspecting which angle, or actually which angles I should say, because if it's conjunct your midheaven, it's opposite your IC. If it's conjunct your descendant, it's opposite your ascendant. Okay, so there's this polarity that needs to come into the delineation, the unpacking, and the understanding of what's unfolding, and essentially what you're working with. But in a nutshell, what you're working with is your soul's desires from a higher conscious level, which lead us back to merging with Source, or the divine. The lower desires, which are more Mars, which is the smaller version of Pluto, are the very personal, selfish desires. And, you know, that has its place. But Pluto is very different to that. Pluto is the soul's work. And I think that's a good place to leave it. Thanks for watching. Namaste. I hope you enjoyed this video, and blessings to all. And gee, I forgot to ask, how's everyone feeling with these eclipses? These eclipses since last year, when the nodes went into Leo Aquarius around May last year, and I talked about this in my previous video, are so intense for me personally. Those eclipses actually related to my father transcending as well. So when you have a big event, like, it's not even an event, that just takes away from the whole meaning of it for me. There's no words to describe what this experience has been, frankly. So, yeah, Pluto and the eclipses and something else called for Daria period.